first step is we're going to create our tunnel. And how we create our tunnel is we're going to, I'm gonna, here in Maya, I'm using Maya 19, I'm going to create a NURBS circle. So I'm going to extrude the circle to make a dimensional tunnel. So I'm going to go to NURBS primitive circle. Now I could go, if you'd like, I could go super slower and then you could go step by step along with me. But since this is being recorded, maybe I'll go normal speed and you can always take notes and rewind. I'm taking that circle that I recorded. I'm going to go backwards so you catch that step. Right click, create NURBS primitives circle. Okay, so it produces a circle right at the center. And this circle is very simple. And it's made of, let's see darker, maybe you can see it. It's made of NURBS control points, which can deform that circle very softly. Like it's made of rubber, like a rubber band. And that's nice because it's going to really be the skin of our tunnel later after we extrude it. Okay, so let's get a normal color there. Let's go right click object. Okay, now we've created that circle. If you'd like, you could give it a name, you know, main circle, because we're going to keep that around. And now I'm going to maybe put 90 degrees on there, turn it to the side, and let's move it off center. And I'll just move it down one of the vector lines. Sorry, one of the grid lines, about 10 units away. All right. Next is I'm going to draw the spine of the circle, kind of where it's going to go. And imagine that we're modeling a snake or something. And we're going to go through the mouth of the snake eventually to see inside it. All right. So the next one you're going to create, and you could have done this in different order. You could have created this spine part first. But I'm going to top view. There's my circle. I'm going to top view, right click, and create, this time, curve tools. Go a little slow there. What did I do? I said right click, create, curve tools, and I create a CV curve tool. And the way CV curve tools work is you click, 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 and you have connection of the dots, really. All right. Now the one I have here is called a 1 degree curve, and it's very jagged. That would be good for a very jagged, kind of jaunty tunnel, but that's too angled and severe. So yours might be set different, your default setting. So let's go back, CV curve tool, let's go to CV curve tools, CV curve. This time I'm gonna go into the little, you see a little box? That's an option box. Look what it said, curve degree 1. Yours probably is gonna be set on 3 cubic or 3 Bezier. So I'm gonna switch to 3, mine was set on 1. So now, if you set on 3, you could set on 5 or 7, and that's gonna make it an even smoother curve. 3 is fine. And so when I set it on 3, look what happens. Nothing happens until I hit my 4th point. Let me do that again. If you've never drawn with CV curves, it's the same as Illustrator. They do an algorithm to give you a nice smooth curve based on the average of points, but we need enough points to average. So 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, it has enough to average between those to create the curve. So that's pretty good. That's kind of what we want. So if we test the CV curve, just create a bunch of clicks and a bunch of points. See what's happening as we have a nice, smooth, jazzy curve shape that can move around these CV points, NURBS points, very gently and very smooth. It's not like polygons, right? This is more like rubber or plastic. It's much more elastic. You know, it moves more smoothly. Okay, so that was just getting our feet wet with CV curves. Now let's do that more usefully. So I'm going to create a path for this circle to be extruded to create my tunnel. All right, so back to create, curve tools, CV curve tool. And what I can do now is hit X, and X is going to snap my first point to the grid. Remember, if you hit X down, look up here. Look, see what's flashing up there? It looks like a little hashtag. That's a magnet that's telling it to snap to grid. So if I hold down X and I draw, it's going to snap to the grid. See how it's snapping to the grid points? Pretty useful. They're snap to point, they're snap to, that's what the little magnet means. They're snap to a bunch of other things. So I started my first point here, boom. Is snap to that grid. That's a good place to start. And then I'm just going to create a meandering journey, a little path here. Just create a double S, triple S, quadruple S shape. And how many points do I have? 1, 2, 3, I have my counter here. All right, well, that's going to count if I had polygons, but this is a NURBS surface here. So I have about, I don't know, 20, 25.
I got a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Can you reconnect it to your grid or you can't?
Can you reconnect it to the grid?
Yeah, you know, like a figure 8?
Yeah, so if you choose 1 and hold X, then that is under the influence of the grid. It's going to snap to any grid. So if you want to reconnect to the grid at any point,
The main grid, the first one, back to the very first DAW.
Oh yeah, the very first point.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I just wondering about that.
Yep. Let me just stop here. Let's look at this curve. If you do this, let's take a glance. Not too many, not too few. Goldilocks. You know, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's about 20 points or something like that. You know, don't do this. And when you're creating a CV curve, please don't do this. You got me? Okay, too heavy. Too heavy. That curve is too heavy. Too many points. Too many. You don't need that many points to make that shape. And it becomes very hard to control. That's too many. This is just right. This would be too few when you're creating a CV curve, that is. Okay. Maybe it seems obvious, maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, let's compare the points that are in these side by side. And I kind of go to object mode. See the control vertex here, which runs through the curve. I mean, there's a lot we can talk about what makes up a curve. And I know it's hard to see, sorry about that. You have other controls here, which show, display, you know, points of a curve and how you select them. I know we won't go too deep into what a curve is composed of and what endpoints and CVs are. I don't think you have to know all that, especially for this project, but just know that at least how many, like that's too many, that's too few. Here's the sweet spot, that many points to make a curve. And that's about it, I want to say. Okay, bye-bye to those. Let's look at our 2 essential curves there. That's going to make up our tunnel. And we're going to fly through that tunnel very soon. But we have to construct it first. Okay, first, I drew this in the top view, and it looks interesting. Well, relatively, I guess. It's like a twisty path through nature, something like that. Something like a stream or a river might flow at kind of random fractals. But it doesn't look interesting here. In side view, it looks totally flat. And same thing in front view. So before we extrude anything, let's maybe go in and add some interest to that shape. Now, Do you see how some of it's lit up yellow? Well, if you hit B, as in boy, it will soft select. If I hit B, can you see the difference?
So basically, we're making a racetrack-ish.
Yeah, it's kind of like a racetrack.
Like the movie Speed Racer, something like that.
Yep.
Okay, I see. So be creative
yeah,
and
it could be. It could be. Use your imagination. It could be.
All right.
Like that. Yes, indeed. All right. If you select more than 3 points and part of it turns yellow, that's because you have soft select hit. If you hit B, just 1 point will isolate select. If B is off, it will just move 1 point at a time. If you select a bunch of points, and look what happens when you hit B as in boy on the keyboard, a whole bunch of them select, and then we'll just select one, and you see it's still moving the neighbors a little bit. It's a really nice way to gently sculpt things, and we're going to use that later. It's called soft select. So it's great for your notes, and it's hit B on your keyboard. All right, so our charge here is to make this curve look interesting from different angles. So I'm going to make this a path. Yeah, it could be like a racetrack, but it also could be like a three-dimensional science fiction racetrack that goes through different axes of space. So let's do a turnaround. Does it look interesting from different angles? I think, yeah, it looks a lot more interesting now. That's cool. All right, so what we're going to do is extrude that on that to make a tunnel. And then we're going to put a camera on that same curve. And we're going to run that camera to be 480 frames to reach the end. Now, if we wanted that cycled, if we wanted to create a cycling animation that the beginning frame is the same as the end frame, does anyone have an idea how they could do that?
Same keys at the beginning and the end.
It's a structural idea.
I can only think of copy and paste.
Well, imagine instead of having this spaghetti shaped path, that it was a donut. The path was circular. And like the orbit of a planet around the sun, you know, the camera could be circling around. That's something you can do too. I think that would take a little bit more time, so you can add that, but just keep that in mind. If you wanted to create an endless loop that it's exactly the same thing over and over, you could cycle it literally forever. You could have like a 2-hour animation, right? Of however you want, who knows why, but you could just make this instead of like a hair path, you could make it a perfect loop. It doesn't have to be a circle, it can be like a squiggly ellipse. All right, I just want to throw that in because you want to try that on your own, go for it. But we'll just do it as is. Okay, next we're gonna take this one, select it, and then shift select the path. And by the way, always a good idea to go to Windows Outliner. Have that open so we can see. You can see the Outliner window, right? That just popped open. Can you see that window menu I'm wiggling?
Yeah.
Oh, good. So sometimes I don't know if the menu is not showing on Zoom. Okay. So it's good that we have main circle here, and I'm going to call that curve the spine because it's going to be multi-purpose. We're going to use that as the track for your camera coming later too. All right. So we're going to select the circle, select the spine, or you could do it through the outliner. Then we're going to go to surfaces. Now you have to be under modeling. Look, if you're under anything else, you're not going to see the menu, right? You have to go to modeling, and then you're going to have surfaces. And then we have extrude. Don't hit that yet. Let's go to the option box. Do you see how we have choices? You might think, oh, we should put it on tube because we're making a tube. Not really. We should put it on path. and then hit apply. Let's back up. Let's do the whole thing again, because you could have easily missed a step, especially when doing a large lecture. It matters what you select first. Okay, you get a different result if you went the other way. So we went to Outliner, and we're going to select the main circle first, or 3 interface, then shift select the spine CV curve. Then we're going to go to surfaces under modeling. We're going to extrude, wait for it, option box, add path. Got that? Okay, now click apply or extrude. And we have the tunnel. Well, right now it looks like an exhaust pipe of a 1972 Cadillac or something. I don't know. But look what can happen. It's kind of fun. If you take that original circle that you made and scale it, you can scale the tunnel. You can make it really skinny, like a piece of spaghetti, or you can make it really big, like a big python snake or something. So that's cool to have that construction history. Also, let's put it about there. Also, what's cool is you could take the spine, and now you have to use the outliner, right? Because you can't even get in there. And now if we select some of the components, look what happens. It's going to update and move with the construction. So that's really fun and really interactive. So you can continue to sculpt and get your heart's desire of how you want this to look. And it's fun to see how it equalizes, has this equilibrium. All the points in the CV curve have tension on them. And you move one, the others are going to move in some tension. Especially when you have that soft select hit, B. All right, now let's go back to, I hit 4 to get the wireframe view. Let's hit 5 and go back to this view. Now this view is plain, boring gray, because there's no colors on it yet. Now some of you are probably thinking, why is it so dark? Did someone turn out the lights? Well, there's no lights in the scene yet. So no, that's not true. And actually, what the heck, when we look on the inside, it looks like there's light on the inside and not the outside. Why is that? So the reason that is, now we have the surface, by the way. We could name this surface tube skin for the surface. The reason it is because what's called the surface normals. And there's these little needles. They're imaginary needles that describe what should be dark in CGI and what should be light. And I guess I don't have to get into too much detail with it, but it's a good FYI if you know this kind of stuff. Because if I go display and I go, this is a NURB surface. By the way, it's not made of polygons. If any of you are used to modeling of polygons, this is not polygons. This is a NURB surface. So if I go to NURBS and I show the normals, I click on the normals. Can you see it's like a cactus, and the cactus should have needles pointing out. But do you see how the needles are pointing in? It looks like one of the worms or something in Dune. Those needles should be pointing out.
The movie Tremor.
Yeah, or Tremor. Yep, exactly. There's
Classic.
There's a lot of classic sci-fi this totally looks like. So what we have to do is reverse the surface. And because the way CGI works, that those needles called normals are perpendicular to the surface, it tells Maya where to shade and where to lighten surfaces. So I'm going to reverse the surface. The very last one, reverse direction. So there's a reverse for mesh when it's made out of polygons. And this is not made out of polygons. This is made out of NURBS. So you need a NURBS version of surface direction. And it's the very bottom one, reverse direction. Okay, now you can see the needles are pointing outward, how they should look. And that's how normals work. So we're going to turn them off. All right. So now we can see it a little bit clearer. Now, maybe that's not what you wanted. Maybe you wanted the NURBS pointed on the inside because you're going to put a camera on the inside. But I didn't want to show you how to which is what we're going to do. But I did want to show you how to reverse surfaces when it looks dark and when it's black and it shouldn't look that way. If it's a polygon, you use mesh tool reverse, mesh display reverse. If it's NURBS, you're going to use surface as reverse direction. And interesting enough, the way it was to begin with was the way we want it, because we're not even going to see the outside of it. We're going to see the inside of it. All right. Now make final touches on the construction of the tube until the way you like it. And let's call that the physical part of the demo that's achieved. All right, let's go on to this part. Attach camera to path. Okay, switching a share back to Maya. Okay, so yeah, we want to be able to see inside the tunnel, so the normals and the light should be turned to the inside as it was in the beginning. If it is not that way, and it can be flipped in yours, you might create this tunnel and then it's dark on the inside. Now you know how to switch it, right? That you don't have to display the normals. You don't even have to fool that. All you have to do is, if it's a surface, you go into surfaces, make sure you select it, and reverse direction. Okay, now let's do a favor for ourselves and put this tube on a layer. Just select it and click in your channel box layer editor, that one right there. And I'm going to name that layer tube, save it, and let's make that invisible for the moment. So this is a bit easier to work with. And you see how this circle still is kind of involving that curve? We don't want to mess with it. And by the way, I didn't show you this yet. Did you know you could move part of that circle and look what happens to the surface? All the rest of the surface changes. Isn't that cool? So it kind of looks like, what's that candy? Twizzlers or something? You can move it like that. You can give, and if you would have done like a multi-degree NURBS circle, you could put ribs in this thing. So it looks like a Twizzlers or some kind of licorice or something. You know what I'm saying? Why would you do that? I don't know, because it would give some definition to the landscape and tunnel later. Just an FYI. Anyway, let's keep it as it is. Say we don't want to change it. We're going to put that circle on a layer. Just click that, put it on a layer 2, and put circle, and let's protect it because we don't want to accidentally knock it and change things. So, and that it's also on a layer, and let's take off the tube. So we have left this essential spine curve. And now we're going to create a camera and put that camera on the curve. All right, so let's go for it. We're going to go under create. We can hold the space bar, create cameras, and let's tear off menu here. Oops. There we go. So we have camera, and aim, camera, aim, and up. There's different kinds of cameras we can create. What are these things? Well, it's kind of like having a camera and then having a camera on a tripod. You know what? Some tripods have that stick, that handle coming out that you can control the up. Here's one with another stick that you can control the up as well as the aim. The aim is where the camera is looking at. So it's like having a rig and controlling a camera. Well, guess what? We're going to create our own rig. We can use these and without giving a whole lecture on cameras. The thing is, we could create a camera and slap it right on there and put it on what's called a path animation. But if we do that, it's going to be really hard to control the camera. The camera could flip around and do kind of crazy stuff. That's hard to control. So what we need is to create a minimal rig. And when I say rig, it just means like kind of control, put a little bit of extra buffering between the camera and the path that we can control. kind of like putting a handle on something, so, or a doorknob on the door to open it. This makes it easier to control. So we're going to create our own rig. So let's just create a straight up camera. We're going to create a camera, and it creates one in the middle of our space. And let's name it. So it's not so prosaic, you know, animate, you know, camera one. So what? Let's name it AnimCam. So we know what that is. AnimCam. Okay, now we're going to, remember I said you can use X, hold X down and snap to grid. We can snap to grid to that grid point that we started at. Now, we could use a command that says put camera onto path animation. But we're going to create a little bit of a, quote, rig before we do that for more control. So we're going to create one more thing called a locator. So right click, create a locator. And what a locator is just like a null object. It doesn't render, it's really nothing but a three-dimensional X that you can parent stuff to. That's all we need. Just the thing with sticks on it. I mean, it has rotational, directional properties to it. That's all we need. Okay, now we're gonna also snap grid to there. All right, we could have started over here. It didn't matter. We just start at one end. Okay, now what we'd like to do is give it a little orientation beginning. I'm going to rotate that locator, kind of pick an axis that's in the direction of the flow of that curve, like that. Okay. Something like that before we get started. Now I'm going to, that is selected, I'll keep it selected, and then I'll select the curve. And we're going to put that on a path. We're going to do what's called a path animation. Rigging, constraint, motion path, attached to motion path. Did everyone get that? So you had to change a bunch of things. You had to go into menu set rigging. You had to go into constrain. Then you go to motion path, and then you get attached to motion path. Okay, so that's done. So you select the locator first, shift select that, then go through those steps to connect to motion path. All right, let's back up and see what happens when we click play. Okay, well, that's cool. It's putting this locator down the path, and you can see how it's favoring direction down the path, which is more accurate with this locator. So it's a good thing to have a locator go down the path, which we can control, and then just parent the camera to the locator. See? Okay, now one problem is it's moving too fast. We want it to move slowly. We want it to take 20 seconds to go down the path. All right? Not 120 frames. We want 480 frames. What do we do? Well, we could change it internally, or we can just redo this. Let's redo it another way, no matter what here, to emphasize the steps. So I'm just going to back up before we did that. And remember, we're at the step where we oriented that down the curve, and we're just about to attach it. But wait, before we attach it, let's make sure, oh, I said 200. Let's make sure this is 480. Okay, wait. Okay, we're shooting at 24 frames a second, and we're playing it back at play 24 frames a second, not play every frame. You can change it there, or you can change it down here in the quick set. Let's do it again. Now things are going to change because we changed our timeline. We changed it to 480 frames, so it's going to slow down now. So we're going to select the locator, just the locator, shift select the path. This time we have 480 frames there. And now we're going to go into rigging, constrain, motion paths attached to motion path. All right, now let's see it go. Now it should go slower. And that's kind of the speed we want. I mean, if we wanted to do like a 3-minute long singular path, we could do that for the project. You would just have to put in the right frame number for 3 minutes, which should be thousands of frames, right? So where are we now? We have a camera rig, which is a locator that's flowing and moving down the curve slowly for 480 frames, and that's what I aimed for. Okay. And it's through rigging, constraint, motion paths attached to path. So it's worth emphasizing that we didn't attach the camera to the path, we attached the locator. Now we can attach the camera to the path. Sorry, I'm not stating that right. We can attach the camera to the locator. So in other words, the locator is the car, the spline is the road, and the camera is just going for a ride. Make sense? So it's going for a ride on that locator. So all we're going to do is select the camera, shift select the locator, and hit P. I mean, you could constrain it. That's a parent. You could do a parent constraint, but I just did a straight up nodal parent. That means you select one thing and you make it a parent. That's a parent on the. If you look at what's happening right here in the hypergraph, you have one node attached as a baby, as a child to another node. So that means that one is going to do whatever that one does. It's a parent, and this is a child, so it's going to do whatever the parent tells it. And the parent's saying, you are going for a ride. And away they go. Where are they going? Who knows? But now the camera's going for a ride.
So then now to rotate the camera, would you have to rotate the locator?
Yeah, you're a step ahead of me. That's exactly right. I mean, in a good way. Now, because this one is not engaged in anything, this one is. It's going to give you an error. Jonathan got that red arrow and said, you want to try to do something? I said, look at all that. All those channels are already taken up and engaged. So we can't really make modifications on that. We can make modifications on the motion path. When we click that, we can have front twist. We can do up twist. This may answer your question. We could do side twist. So if you want to grab the locator and grab the input to the locator, we can click these things and middle mouse button, change it. But what's even better is we have this one, which we can put rotation on. We can put different stuff on that. And because it's a child, it's going to still follow, you know, where the parent goes. So if I wanted, for some reason, the camera to go upside down here, like, wee, it's going on a ride upside down, and I want it to flip upside down, do you see? I can't do that on the locator without doing something hardcore. And this is kind of dangerous. These things are hard to animate, but it's much easier to do that flip if that's what you want. Let's say we want to do another one where it goes here and it flips back up by this point. I can flip, I'm just selecting the camera, and I can hit S, and it's gonna flip upside down and then do kind of a crazy skateboard move here. Now it's probably what you don't want, right? It's gonna get you seasick. So I was just showing you that in case.
But isn't it cooler like that? Isn't the whole point to be, you know, creative a bit? So making skateboards and all that?
It depends maybe on what your texture is. Like
Okay.
if it's really intense texture and it's optically very graphic, it could be like too much.
All right.
Depending on you don't want to, you'll see later when we start decorating this tube, you don't want to lose your artwork. You don't want to move around too much. Same thing with stop motion. But my point here is that you can control the camera better once you have it on this rig, because it has this medium, it has this vehicle of the locator it's traveling on. So then you can put all kinds of, you know, stuff on here you want to change and rotate to create any effects. Or maybe there's like something on the wall. It can look to the right or to the left. You can animate right there on the camera. So what we did is create a camera rig. And here we go. Now, we see the first frame is numbered nicely for us. Thank you, Maya. And the last frame is numbered nicely for us, 480. And we have to just wait for the camera to come home here. Just waiting for it. There it is, coming home. And it slows in and it slows out, like a car or bus coming to a stop there. If you don't want that to happen, if you want to change speeds, it's kind of a cool thing. If you select the curve, what I'm calling the spine, you see 480. And let's go to Windows Animation Graph Editor. And you use the Graph Editor, you'll have some data here. And let's go back to the beginning and select. At the beginning, we have this curve, which is already timestamped at 1, 2. Now you could move these. Okay, the subject is what now? The subject is now if you want to modify the speed of the camera on the curve. All right. So if you like the way the camera is oriented, but you don't like the speed, or say you want it to move faster and then slow down, here's where you can do that. Or you can even have it go in reverse. Check this out. So if you select that locator and you open up the graph editor, which was in the Windows Animation Editor Graph Editor, you have a curve. That curve represents speed. And you, remember we saw it slow into home like a bus slowing down? That's because this curve is flattening out. It's slowing down. It has an ease in and an ease out. If we selected this curve and then made it like this, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? It's going to peel out. It's going to burn rubber right here. Let's see. Why is it doing that? It's doing that acceleration because the curve that's driving it is much more steep. You could really exaggerate and look what's going to happen. Speedy Gonzalez. And that's going to slow down. Or it might even get all the way to the 100% end of its path early. Because time is graphed here over distance. So if it made 100% of the path, you can see right here, 100%. If it made 100% of the path, it's just going to get to the end. What would happen if we went like that? What do you think is going to happen? Any guesses? Bueller? Any guesses? What's going to happen?
Gonna go slower?
I think I killed it. Oh no. I'm going to back up a second. This might be a graphics card issue. Okay, there. So, well, I think it's going to go backwards, but I made it go backwards too early. I gotta do something like that. So it's going to go forward a little bit and then wait. Let's do this again. What's that ride? It's like a ride that Six Flags that does that. So it's going to go, if we look at the graph like that, sorry, I can't move backward past point 1. So I need a little bit forward and then it goes below. So if you go below, this is what's going to happen. Forward, 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 and then, oh, go back home. It goes back. So it's pretty powerful if you know how to use these curves, and you can get more time out of this setup if you want to move this from 4A to all the way down here, and then you can extend the frames below if you want to get more seconds out of it. Graph editor is very powerful for changing speed. So before it was like this, starting at frame 1, and this one, let's frame this a little better, was just slow in and slow out, ease out and ease in. It was more like that. So I like the ease in aspect, maybe a little bit less, but I'm going to try to match it a little bit better for the ease in and ease out. So the slowing down does kind of help, because if I want to create a looping animation, I can use After Effects after the render and merge these together if they're more similar to the same speed. So two choices are I could have these flat like this and have them slow down, or you could have them just very linear like that, and you could just match the speed. So whatever the input speed is, the output speed is matching it. You know, so let's do that. I think it's going to be more, it's going to not perceive as much as a cycle if we do a linear, no slow ins and no slow outs. So Maya just by default gives you an ease in and ease out, but you don't have to use it. And we are right 480 frames. There we go. So thank you for telling me. Yep, we turned on the tunnel and we're going to be the camera now. I can see the camera moving. So how to do that? So we're going to just simply switch the camera. We're going to go to panels, perspective, anim cam. Right? So in that way, we're switching cameras. We're switching the view to that camera. What's that camera? That's the anim camera. All right. Now let's hit 5, and we're going to click play. So that is, whoa. Remember, Eric, I said we could probably get dizzy if we start flipping around too much. Already, I think we're feeling dizzy looking at this. Okay, let's stop this before. I know we just ate too. We don't want to go on a roller coaster ride after we just had a meal. All right. So one thing that's going to help is if we zoom the camera out a little bit. The camera lens is just a bit zoomed in, and so it's giving us a little visual headache. So what we're going to do is we have the anim camera selected. We're going to go to View, select Camera, make sure we have it selected, and then in here, we have data, and it's going to say focal length. You see that? Put the focal length, it's 35 is a normal lens, a 35, it's 35 millimeter lens. Let's go to a wide angle lens. If we put like 14 in here, so you see what happened? We're going to zoom, we're going to see everything more wide angle. Did everybody catch that one? So we select the camera, and then we go to focal length, and we changed it. It defaults at 35, and we changed the focal length to 14. And now look at the difference. A little bit better. To me, kind of a bit too close. Let me put that down to 10. That's better. It's going to be different on yours. Everyone's going to be slightly different. But put the camera at a focal length that feels comfortable. That's not going to make you seasick. Because it's really possible to make someone optically sick when you know, the eyes just have a tendency to track things, and even if you're not physically moving. All right, so let's see what we have there. Ooh, I'm going backwards. Let's play it forward. That's much better. As long as we can see a little bit further down the road, it's better on your eyes. Now you could really exaggerate this and put like 5 and see way down the road. And that's cool too, but I think your textures are gonna get kind of stretched here. Too much. Let's put it at 10. All right. And let's watch it. So we have a cool, all right, tunnel structure already that we're working on. Someone had, I have to leave for a bit, I'll be right back. Okay. All right, now the idea would be like when you see the end of the tunnel here, you would start fading that into the beginning of the tunnel. And if you had this thing on a torus or a donut shape, it would be endless, you know, so your beginning would be the start. So if you want to make this whole curve and extrude a donut shape and put the camera on a NURB circle and have it go forever, you could do that. You could have the 480 frame be exactly matched up with the 1 frame. It's up to you. Okay, so next part is we're gonna do some textures, some colors, some fun stuff on here. So let's save, because we haven't done that, and we're gonna cry if it crashes. Cry or curse. Alrighty, I'm going to just put this thing on my desktop, tube animation. Good to save in versions, 1, tube, anim 1. All right. Now there's so many kind of cool things we can do with this. I am going to show you some textures, similar textures that we used on the entity. And then I'm going to show you paint effects. If you've never used paint effects before, those are fun to use. And I don't think we're going to have time today, but I could, per request, show you particle effects. How to even add particle effects to this too. And it's pretty cool. Let's just start with a couple basic textures. And Emmett was asking about a light. What if you wanted to add a light? Maybe we'll get to that. We'll get to that today and have something that, what if there was like fireflies or lights chasing you and chasing in front of you or something and following with you? What if that's an effect you want? That could be really cool. So we'll try to get what we get to today. All right, now, first things first, let's see if we can add some kind of a texture to it. And this surface is a NURB surface, so it's different than, this surface is different than a polygon surface. If you wanted to, you could convert this to a polygon surface. You see how NURBS reacts? If I hit 1, it's like that, 3, it's smooth. It's a little bit different topology than polygon. They look kind of similar. But anyway, if I put you remember this from the other video, if I put a material on it, I'm going to put a Lambert. Now, yes, I could put a Arnold material on it. That's up to you, and you want to use Arnold materials and Arnold lights. I'm going to show you a very simple way. You render really quickly, but all of this is interchangeable if you want to use Arnold. So you'd right click, you'd add a new material, and you put an Arnold standard surface. I was showing you different ways to do alternate quick renders. So just for a demo, I'm going to show you an old school Lambert and then put a leather texture on it right here. Let's give it a scary kind of Halloween like you're traveling through intestines or something. It would be like that, like guts. All right, what would that look like? Well, let's hit 6 so we know what the texture would look like. And just through, let's maybe hide the wireframe. Doing nothing else with the texture, that looks pretty interesting. Looks kind of cool. It kind of looks like your camera got swallowed by some monster and it's going down his throat.
The inner organs of a human.
Or, yeah, right. It could be going through the intestines or organs of a human being, right? What's that when they put the camera inside you? Thank you, Emmett. I think both are scary, but that's funny. Exactly. Okay, it's getting, well, first of all, let's talk about textures. Of course, you can modify this texture, go in the materials, and, you know, what we did in the other demo for the entity, we could change the cell size, you can make the cells smaller or bigger. Now, you're not going to really see everything, all the detail in this view, because it is the hardware render view. So you could do some test renders. Here we go, this little eyeball here. Now, it might be really dark inside there, right? Let's just do a regular old Maya software render and see what it looks like. Wrong camera. Now it especially looks like an intestine from the outside. Or super hot Cheetos or something. Okay. Why can't I say that? And we're gonna have to change the camera render. We want the anim cam. This is what's gonna look like. Okay, it's a little bit dark on that side, but if I change the cell size and re-render, you can kind of get a cool looking cellular thing going on there. Right? And if you wanted, you could see a bump, like a cell size 0.65 bump. You could put a bump on that at the same size, like go in the bump mapping, put a leather on there, right? And for, what was it, 0.65? And then make this kind of really bumpy. What would that look like rendered? A little bit too much, so I'm gonna go to the bump degree, maybe bring it down. Ooh, it's like you got swallowed by a snake now. A little bump there. I don't know, that's kind of fun. Right there as a landscape, a reptilian landscape, always moving like through the guts of a snake would kind of be fun, kind of be cool. But let's talk about, you know, I don't want this lecture to be forever, so I want you to imagine all the other textures that we use on the entity that you could apply here, okay? And it's just so infinite, and everything that you've done to your first entity when it was CGI, you could apply to the skin of your tunnel here. But let's talk about light, because it's getting kind of dark inside here, and if you'd want to lighten that up, well, one way to lighten it up is you could right-click material and add some incandescence. I don't like that because it makes it look milky. I mean, it does take away the dark, but it also adds smoke and hazy. I don't really recommend that. You also could modify diffuse a little bit more and turn that up, and that will help a little bit. See, we see a little more detail here. But really, we kind of have to get a light inside there. Yes, like colonoscopy. And we have to put a light inside to be able to see. And that might kind of answer a little bit this question, Emmett, too, because let's back the camera up a little bit, all the way to start. All right, and I'm gonna save it. I feel like it's gonna crash any minute. I just have that feeling. And let me switch cameras back to the perspective, the work cam. And all right, so I have this locator still it's still a useful rig to use for other stuff, like if I wanted a light. So I could create a, I could create a light. In fact, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create just a shape. I want this light to be physical. I want to see the light and I want to see it glow. So why couldn't we just do this? We're just going to create, and let's just make a polygon sphere. And where the heck did it go? Oh, there it is. All right. I mean, we really don't need a texture. You can delete that texture box for it. Now we're going to keep this one is fine. Make sure everything is cool. Okay, this one, that texture box is for that NURBS. Just leave it alone. If it bothers you, if you don't like it, out of sight, out of mind. Just put it on a layer. Bye-bye. Don't worry about it. Don't touch it. Okay, so this one doesn't need to be that complex. I don't know why it's 20 by 20. Let's just do 5 by 5. A simple thing like that. Okay, now remember, we can snap to grid to snap that, or snap to point, whichever you like, to get it near the area we want it. And if we put this, if we want this thing like an orb, like a glowing orb or something, and we want to put it in front of the camera so we can see it, right? So if we switch to the Anim camera, we see this orb here lighting our way. That could be part of it. Now this orb is a stand-in for your entity, so to speak, okay? So just think of that as what later you're going to cut in, but we're going to actually make this a source of light. So how to do that? Well, if this were an Arnold and it had incandescence, it would actually give off light. And we render it in Arnold, it would give off light. You know, perhaps I could do a separate demo for that, but I'm going to show you a really easy way that renders really fast and it looks pretty cool. And it's just using glow and a little bit incandescence using the Maya software. Well, first thing is we want this orb to follow wherever the camera goes. Right now, we're going to zoom right by it, bye-bye, and we never see it again. We don't want that. We want this orb to follow wherever the camera goes. So we're going to select the orb. Let's call it orb. And then we're going to select the locator. And we're going to parent the orb to the locator. So now it's going to go wherever the camera goes. And also, if you wanted to change, I guess this is a proxy for your entity too, right? So you want it to wiggle or change shape or change size randomly. Yeah, you could do that. And it's just going to still follow the locator, right? If you wanted to animate, maybe I'll just change the scale on it randomly. Something like that. Cut and pasting, right, shift, holding shift down, left mouse button, copy, right click, copy, and pasting keys. It's pretty handy. So now you've got that thing. Let's paste again. Kind of fussing with it now, I don't need to, but yeah, now you got the thing changing size as it doesn't stay in just exactly one place. More natural. Okay, so to make that thing glow, is you can give it a material that's also flat, like assign new material. You can give it also like a Lambert material and right click, material attributes. Maybe give it a little bit of a yellowish or something if you want to see like a golden glowing orb or something like that. You could put a little bit of incandescence on it and maybe give it an orangish incandescent. You're not going to see this till you render it. But under special effect, you have something called glow intensity. Oh, by the way, take diffuse and put diffuse all the way up and ambient color all the way up. All right, and incandescent will just turn kind of too white. Just turn that up a little bit. And then glow intensity, just a smidgen. Let's just put that like 0.2. Okay? Now let's see what happens when we render it. All right, so we've got a little bit of a glowing orb going on there. And it kind of looks like a light source. So maybe this could be a little bit smoother. So I'm gonna maybe go into modeling and mesh smooth. All right. So you could have some effect like that. Of course, you could also do that in After Effects if you wanted to exaggerate. Now, it isn't really casting light. It's the illusion that it's casting light. If you want it really casting light, then do the same thing with an Arnold material. And there's the incandescence there. And then when you render it, everything has to be made of Arnold material. But then you put the same textures on it, and then you render with Arnold, it will actually light up like a real light would. But it's going to take longer. Okay? And you've got 3 minutes to do, but you're going to cycle it. So I'm giving you, look at how fast, it literally was in a fraction of a second, right? Just like click. It didn't even take a second to render. So I'm giving you light ways to do it with cheap Maya materials. And by the way, back to this texture, just like your entity, this reptilian red texture, you can animate its color. You don't have to stay on that red color. You can, over time, change it. Adding interest, and right-click Set Key on things. Change the color over time. And if you wanted it to loop, just make the last frame of it similar to, you know, the first frame. These are really crazy psychedelics here. Yeah. And just make this, right? Using the middle mouse button, and then right click. And now you're having some color orchestration going on. It's going to go from that ochre yellow, and it's going to slowly fade to an orangish red, and then a red, a meat like red, and then magenta, and then it's going to fade into blue and the green. So you could cycle that animation, and of course we don't see it, it'll be rendered, but it's going to look pretty cool. It's going to look kind of like this, right? That's nice. Just think what you could do in After Effects and jazz this up and even do more fun things to it. All right, now, we haven't even gotten to the fun stuff yet as far as I view this. So let this stand in for all the stuff you can do with texture. You can put a light in there and light it up inside. You can put any kind of a texture and animate any of the attributes of the texture over time. You could change the color of the light as it's going. You could modify and change that light color. And right here, as it's going through here, let's say you wanted to really give off colored light. Well, you could create a little point light. Same thing, put it back right here. I would put it maybe like in back of that sphere that you made. And then similarly, parent that light to that very useful locator as well. And it's giving me an error, but it shouldn't give me an error. It says, is already child of the parent. Oh, really? Okay, I already parented it. Sorry about that. All right, so now let's see. Hit 7, and 7 displays the lights in the scene. And now we're seeing, let's render that. Now we're seeing real light being shed on that, in that interior. So now we don't have any dark parts. So you could put little lights, as many as you want. If I looked into the outliner, I would see a list of everything else I have in the shot. Where's my outliner? I think it is somewhere here. Sorry, it's my graph editor. Here's my hypershade. Okay, anyway, it's fine. If I want to grab that light, what? Here it is. I have so many windows open, folks. It's crazy. All right, there's outliner, and I have, pop it open. Look, I have all the stuff right handy. Point light, I got my orb, I got that. And here I could animate the color of the light. That'd be kind of cool. If I animated the color to be like magenta, it's going to affect the colors of everything else. Be a little bit like a sunset. Look like that. And then let's make the last frame that same color. And then I could change the color of the light subtly to augment, you know, the feeling of what the mood is in there. Probably don't want to completely undo my color changes for the texture, but maybe just a little bit of flavor on the light, warm or cool, like that. Maybe one more. Could actually even further warm up a warm color on the skin. So tie together stuff like that. So here you have this light changing color. Look how it's like getting more color harmony and connections between them. All right. This would be a real fast render, folks. Just using the simple Maya software and doing all the rest in After Effects later. Well, I'm going to show you now some fun things with using paint effects. So I'm going to guess that maybe some of you have used paint effects before. Have you ever had my class previous to this, or the digital modeling class where you use any paint effects? Maybe not. So I'm going to show you that. It's very easy. It's nothing to it. So what paint effects is like, it's like if you had 3D effects in a spray paint can, and you know, you just spray with it, and out of it, instead of paint, it can be paint, but out of it, it comes like three-dimensional things, and those things stick to the walls of your tunnel. All right, so what do I mean? Well, let's try some. So what I'm going to do is save it, and then I'm going to create some paint effects. So under modeling, you're going to have a menu that says, wow, there's so much in here. Yeah, but okay, go to modeling, go to generate, and you're going to have something that says make paintable. Let's go through those steps once again. Let's choose a different view if you like. Right click the tunnel. Make sure it's left click, that is. Select it. Make sure it's selected, or select it in the outliner, wherever, so you know that for sure that tunnel, that tube skin is selected. And then you're going to go into modeling, go into generate, and say make paintable. That prepares the surface for paint effects. Okay, good. Make paintable. Next is you're going to go to generate get brush. And that will give you a menu. It's going to pop up in a sec, a menu. Can you see these brushes? All this menu that popped up?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, just want to make sure everyone's seeing what I'm. All right, now you have all these brushes. It goes on and on. There's fire. There's hair. Fluids. Smoke. Miscellaneous. There's these types of science fiction effects. It's very random. Fluid effects, explosions. All right, so, and a kind of a tune effect. All of this stuff you can paint on here. So when if I click off here, and again, I'm going to go to generate, get brush, it's going to get me into the paint effects, which allow me to paint those directly on a surface. These are the ones, you can use any of these, but the ones that say paint effects are going to stick to the skin of the tube. So if you said one that looks really kind of cool is one that's galactic. And there's one that says like space. If I click on that, and then I go to perspective anim cam, I will get this thing that looks like a circular, well, a red circle with a needle. And you can see how the needle is pointing in, it's pointing toward us. Now, if you can guess, why is that needle pointing inside instead of outside?
I'm going to guess the needle is a normal,
Yep.
and it's facing out, or it's facing inward.
Yeah. So this is the way Paint Effects works, because Paint Effects, how does it know where to paint? Well, it paints according to where the normals are pointing. And for this surface, the normals are pointing in. So the Paint Effects are going to fall in the circle, inside the circle, instead of painting on the outside of the circle. Why am I saying circle? Outside of the tube. Okay, so if I paint, you see how it looks like confetti right now. Now it's painting on the inside of the tube, actually. So if we zoom out, it may kind of look like it's painting on the outside of the tube, but it's not really. It's just kind of sticking out, but it's really painting on the inside of the tube. And this is a pretty cool effect, because when we render it, it looks really different. Let's give it a render. See the little star effects? They're very small. So let's do this again. Let's undo. Let's undo that paint effect. And by the way, in Outliner, they show up as these little strokes. And I think the light is a little bit too bright. So let's go to the Outliner. And in the Outliner, I'm going to make the intensity of the light a lot less, maybe 0.3. All right, maybe a little bit less, like how about 0.3? So we have like a subdued, more romantic looking, like candlelight, and then we're gonna have a darker background. And now I'm gonna go back to my brush. And my brush here was Galactic brush, okay? And I'm gonna go back and paint it again, but this time I'm gonna paint it, I'm gonna hold B down and drag. And you see what happens when I drag with B? It makes the brush bigger or smaller. So if I drag B to my right, it makes the effect bigger. So those pieces of confetti get bigger. All right, and now look what it looks like in the render. So they start to glow, and actually they twinkle a little bit. So they stick to the tube, so we pass through it. So if I do this kind of stuff as I go, paint, look at this dark area, it'd be fun to paint that. I paint it with paint effects. It's a real quick and easy way to add effects. Right? Do another render. All right, so many other different effects we can add here with paint effects. Let's explore some more of those. And again, they're under modeling, generate, get brush. And there's all kind of weird things. I don't know why this is in there, but you could add hairy arms to your shot, of course, because I don't know, maybe you want to add hairy arms, who knows. And you have to render it to see the effect, but this is what it looks like. Oh God, I think it's the light is pink. It looks really pink, but I don't know, this is totally weird to add like a hairy arm to your shot. Like I said, it's just really, really random, the thing. So try to figure out what your theme is to your tube and trying to match it. If your entity is really mechanical or technological, maybe you could choose some of these things that are electrical. There's one that's an electrical spark-like effect, like that. And what's cool about that, of course, you have to render it to see it.
So have fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, explore. That's the experimental part, is have fun.
Explore and be creative. Okay.
Then decide what your theme is. It shouldn't be random in the end. Just like the entity was fun, but it's not totally random. Once you figure out what you can do, then try to fit your entity, that they're in harmony with each other. That if one's like supposed to be electrical or technological, you know, that you match that and you find the tools in your background that you can match it with it. So let's see, the cool thing about these sparks is that they animate. They self-animate. They look like sparks. And like when you roll, you can kind of see it when you roll, you see it pulsing like that. If I rendered this whole sequence, you would see these sparks like shooting, like sparklers. It's kind of cool. And you have all kinds of stuff here. If you have a very natural thing in your entity, you're using leaves and sticks, maybe you could use plant-like, botanical kinds of things. Anything with a little clock in it means it's going to be very heavy. You know, there's going to be a ton of detail, and it could choke your Maya. So just be careful using anything with a little clock. It's just telling you, hey, this is really heavy stuff. So as you pass through it, you're going to see there's quite a bit of dense amount of detail there. And save it. Give it a little render, see what that looks like. It's kind of a cool look, like the sun coming up behind the flowers. Again, remember what you're doing. You're creating a background and a landscape for your entity. So everything you're creating, you want it to complement the entity that you're building off to the side, and then you're going to put those two things together. And that's going to be your project 3. So this is just the background. So make sure you're building it to receive the entity that's going to be coming to it. Anyway, I just want to show you there's all kinds of things like metal. There's interesting one. It's like razor wire or barbed wire. There's one for that. You can add like this barbed wire thing. Kind of looks like bramble or prickly vines of plants too. Sometimes one thing can look like another thing and you just roll with it that, well, it looks a little bit more naturalistic or a little bit more like plants than it does metal. And sometimes even this looks cooler than this. That is, the hardware display sometimes looks better than the software's display because it just looks old school and you want a retro look to it. You have different renders here. There's a vector render. See, I told you it would crash. And that's one you see, right? All right. And this is just the content browser window. And I guess you weren't seeing that before. Yeah, go through this like a kid in a candy store just to see what it does, but then you're not going to end up using it. There's going to be a rhyme to that reason. And you're going to put the materials and the aesthetics and the objects and the content that match the theme of your entities going already. So if your entity, you use a lot of metallic parts, then to find something that harmonizes with that thematically. If you used food for your entity, maybe find something that matches that in a counterpoint or complement. Some of you might have used clay in a very expressive clay figurine kind of animation. Well, find something that you can create as a background that gives dimension and doesn't distract too much. It just complements. So you could use maybe clouds. There's one here that's, there's grasses, if that were done softly or something. There's glows. There's ones that I think I saw right here, watercolor, something softer, water mesh, weather, there's rain. You could have the inside of the tube rain, who knows? Pens, pencils, fibers, here it is, clouds. Could be clouds that appear. I know you can't see my other screen, but let me just demonstrate by pointing here. You could have something that doesn't distract in these paint effects as well. They don't have to be so graphic if you don't want. They could be wispy, nebulous things that render. And all of this stuff, all the paint effects will cheaply render in the Maya software. Now, none of these paint effects will render in Arnold, none of them. So, sorry to say, Arnold is a far, far superior renderer. And if you want to render on Arnold, you're going to get a great, fantastic looking result. But you've got to start out, like in the demo that I did for the Entity 2, you got to start out with Arnold materials, and you got to light with Arnold lights, and rendered with Arnold. So that looks great, but it takes a longer time. And you're going to have more crashes, and you're going to have more time in the render. If you can't afford the time and start now, yeah, use Arnold because it's going to look better. But the caveats are it's going to take more time. You've got to use all Arnold materials. And 2 is Arnold does not render paint effects. Bummer. So how do you do it? Well, you could composite. You could render the tunnel skin in Arnold, then have another pass and render separately all the paint effects using Maya. Bring it into After Effects and then composite those 2 layers together to look nice. That's no big deal. Okay, but it's more rendering. Or you can convert any of the, let me share my screen, it's a very simple thing here. Here's with Maya. If you wanted this clutch of flowers or lilacs or whatever they are, Myosotis is the name of the plant, apparently. It's a species. If you want that to render in another renderer, you could convert it to polygons. Beware, be very careful, because it could, just trying to convert this to polys, it could crash because it's already very, very heavy. So if you selected this, and by the way, as I mentioned before, it appears as strokes. If you look in the outliner, these things say strokes. Stroke 1, 2, 3. So this is how they appear. They're not really geometry yet, folks. These are just algorithms. They're things that are illusions that appear three-dimensional, but they're not real yet. So here's this Myosotis heavy. If you want to make them, quote, real, you'd have to convert them to a real polygon. And the way you do that is you select it, of course, and click Modify, Convert, Paint Effects to polygons. And before I do that, I'm gonna click the option box and I want to limit because it could easily crash. I say, okay, I want 100,000 polygon limit. So it's pretty heavy, but kind of don't recommend it doing what I suggested before, rendering 2 passes. It's, unless you have a lot of this, it's probably going to be really easy just to do it in 2 passes. Let's see what happens when I convert it. It said, warning, flower limit exceeds, conversion exceeded 100,000 polygons. But now you see, if I right click off it, and I click on it, and I say vertex, now this part I think didn't get converted. Or did it? Yeah, oh, it did. Okay, it converted it in 3 different parts. So if I go like this and right click, we see that now these are all polygons, now with individual points, and we can see how dense that is. Here it is, just going through it. Right, some plants will be so dense it'll crash Maya to do it. What I was saying before Maya crashed is you could render, if this looks cool to you in an experimental and you want to get a retro wireframe look, you can render the wireframe. And if I do it, it's probably going to crash again. So how would you do it in the setup? Well, right here in your render setup, so we're getting into render, you can render using Maya Vector. Or you could use Maya Hardware, and Maya Hardware is going to render what's just inside this window. So it's not going to render it out, it's going to look at the wireframe. That could be a really neat look. And we've seen some projects in the past that used wireframe. So you can explore that, or you could use Maya software, and of course, Arnold is not going to see it at all. If you render with Arnold, it'll just be black. So a lot of options there. All right. Let's do this because I've been lecturing a long time, a lot of information. Voice is kind of straining now. So I'm going to give you just the last part of this. And it should be pretty familiar because you've done it before. But here's just rendering. Just a reminder of how to render this. Now rendering, it all depends on what your setup is. Here I'll be doing, just a 20-second, 480 frame animation. I have it all set up in my timeline like that. Going back to Maya. I know this is a long lecture, isn't it? I'm going to try to get this finished. Share screen. All right. So right here, the little sprocket here is the render setup. Choose your render, whether it be Maya, hardware. Vector made it crash, sorry. So you have to experiment on your own with that. And or Arnold renderer with the caveats that I mentioned. Let's choose Maya. Let's choose our name. Here's the tab on Maya. You could go high quality if you want. I'm just going to keep the test on low quality. Tube animation. Image format. I recommend that you have a sequence because if it's a movie and it crashes, you lose the whole movie. So I'm going to have a JPEG sequence. You should set this at name.number.extension. Frame padding 4. Start frame 1, end frame 480. Don't forget that. Now, super important not to forget. You got to change the camera because you don't want it to render the person camera. You want it to render the anim camera. Make sure you change that. Easy to forget. And then you render the whole thing like, oh, I rendered the wrong camera. Make sure it's the right camera. And then presets, I'm going to do HD 720, 1280 by 720. That's good enough. If this were you and you're doing a full render, I would do a full 1080. I'm going to have this go a little faster. So I'm rendering a little lower, but I want you to do 1080 HD. Okay. And everything's pretty good. Select close. Now, before I render this, I'm going to set up a folder for these frames to fall into. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say set project. And then I'll put a project on, I have a folder here. I'm going to create a new folder and say tube animation folder. Oops. And I'm going to click open, and that's going to set the project. So everything I save, including what frames I render, are going to fall into this folder. Okay. And say create folder on the desktop. Yes. And now when you go to rendering and you go to render, I'm going to click batch render. If it were Arnold you're rendering, you would click render sequence, because batch render is not going to work for you, for Arnold. So batch render, and then click OK. And now we can see right down here, look below on this field, it says rendering with Arnold. We see in the script editor what's going on here. And now we see what's happening behind the scenes in the script editor. It is rendering this lightning fast. Look at how fast that is. It's almost like half a second or something. So that's cool. I'm going to look at my desktop. And I have my folder here. I know you can't see that. I'm just finding this for you. One sec. Tube animation folder. Okay. So I guess I'll just share this. Oh boy, I just share this screen. This is just my folder on the desktop I have, and I made, there's the, in purple, tube animation folder I made, and I set the project to images, and here's all the images being made. You can see it, how fast it's going. And step through it. Remember I talked about the sparks and they self-animate? It's pretty cool. It's like you're going through an industrial steel plant or something. Yeah, and if you had an entity that looked mechanical or industrial, maybe this is a good matching of the theme. Anyway, so let that go at this rate. It's probably going to be done, oh, I don't know, 15 minutes or so. Probably less. Okay, while it's doing that, any questions on anything?